Hello. You are expected. Welcome to the EDH-Rec wing of the Orzhov Syndicate. I shall be your advocate. The purpose of our meeting is simple. We have studied and organized the data generously donated by EDH-Rec, under duress, and compiled from it an average list for the Orzhov Guild. Our mission now is to modify and prune that list, to take it from being merely average, and instead raising it to the level of regal resplendence truly befitting our guild leader, Teysa Karlov. Teysa Karlov costs a lovely 4 mana and is a 2/4 human advisor. She gives all of our creature tokens vigilance and lifelink, but best of all, whenever a creature dying causes a triggered ability of a permanent we control to trigger, it triggers an additional time. Teysa is the height of the aristocrat's archetype. The sacrifice of our own creatures is not a loss, but a boon, netting us additional cards and draining the life from our enemies. Let us now load Teysa's average deck according to EDH-Rec into the Architect deck building website. Remember, any swaps that we make to this list must be either cost neutral or help lower the price of the deck. Teysa proves that there is life after afterlife. Many of our subjects may leave this mortal coil, but continue their servitude for the church in spirit form. Note, too, how much wealth and resources a single death may accrue for us. Teysa has requested that we modify this list in the following 3 categories. First, luxuriance. Second, consistency. And finally, undeath. Let us begin with the former. Teysa is a guild leader of exquisite, refined tastes, but you needn't be a noble yourself to play this deck. The Church of Deals demands your devotion, and devotion is a high price, so in the event that you find yourself unable to play with any of these more luxuriant options, possibly owing to the fact that you are overdue on your most recent contracts and therefore it must be confiscated as part of your tithes, we would like to provide you with less expensive alternatives. As we say, up with the average, but down with the price. First, Kokosho and Elenda have spiked in price recently due to their increased demand to helm their own commander decks, now that the commander death triggers have been officialized within the rules. Is it amazing to double these death triggers? Oh my Obzadot, yes it is. However, cutting these 2 cards saves us $50. So, away they go. I rather dislike cutting Liliana too, because she is legitimately one of my favorite planeswalkers ever, but she also is not exactly cheap. Anointed Procession is also rather nice, but this card has climbed to the $25 price point, and that makes my stomach hurt. Similarly, Luminous Broodmoth is delicious for Teysa, functioning rather a bit like Mikaeus the Unhallowed, but I'm going to slice this card too because it is still climbing in price. Oh, and there are 2 tutors here too. This is one of the strengths of Black's part of the color pie, but this isn't where Teysa wants you to spend money when you are starting off with this deck. It is much more important to collect several $2 and $3 cards, such as Blood Artist or Revel in Riches, and even the original Teysa, than it is to collect individual expensive cards. Upgrade to them in due time. It behooves us to linger on this point just a moment longer. You see, we aristocrats are masters of making many, many, many small interactions that eventually, collectively, build towards victory over time. 1 life here, 2 life there, nickel and dime, death by 1,000 cuts, as they say, with no individual effort overshadowing that of another. Therefore, when building this deck, we advise you to treat your coin the same way. There are some direct swaps we can make to some of these pricey cards too. For instance, Phyrexian Altar is consistently in the $30 to $40 category, and it is a phenomenal sacrifice outlet. However, Teysa has access to some delightful budget alternatives, cards that I'd frankly be inclined to run even if budget was of no consequence. Spawning Pit can turn tokens into yet more tokens, keeping the aristocrats chain moving smoothly. This has become a staple for my decks, as has the extremely cheap Fanatical Devotion. Sacrificing a creature whenever we like, or to make sure that the next time our lovely creatures will be destroyed, they are regenerated instead, that can protect Teysa and help fuel her death triggers? Brilliant. Grave Pact is also a bit on the high end, so how about we switch it out for a card that costs a little more mana but is 1/28th the price. Martyr's Bond is a Grave Pact for all our permanents. I'm also keenly aware of the fact that many of the cards I cut earlier include card advantage and token production, a very necessary component for Teysa's deck to do her deadly work properly. To honor their departure, I'd like to add in the partner pair Regna and Krov, whose price has fluctuated a bit in the past, but which seem to be pretty cheap at the moment. They make tokens, draw cards, and while Teysa may not double Karlov's activated ability, the board presence and sheer number of death triggers these cards can produce is frankly off the charts. I'll throw in one more budget-friendly token maker here as well, which does not see nearly enough love. Endrick Saar. This deck has over 30 creatures, and dozens of ways to sacrifice the thralls for profit. He's never been more at home. My final edition will be a bit odd, because at the current time of recording, this card is still a smidge wallet-crushing. However, Massacre Worm is receiving a reprint in Core 21, and Teysa players should hop onto this as soon as possible. Remember, Teysa doesn't just double the triggers that occur when your own creatures die. Massacre Worm will make each opponent lose 4 life for every creature they lose. That is a game-winning level of power. Alright, let us move now to our second section. Our next goal is to help the deck strategy become more consistent. Teysa is not what the common folk might refer to as a swingy archetype, where the deck may accidentally pivot from excellent performance in one game to poor performance in the next. It is a consistent deck, however, the longer we look at this list, the more we can see that there are certainly places that require fine-tuning. There are strange mana pips, or cost requirements, or timing restrictions that make me doubt their efficacy and therefore their devotion to the church. The biggest example of this, in my humble opinion, is Kaya's Wrath. This card was released in the same set as Teysa, so many players most likely have this card currently available very easily. But for Teysa's sake, stop playing it. Replace it with a Fumigate. It is 5 mana instead of 4, but it is so worth it to pay 2 white and 3 generic instead of exactly 2 white and exactly 2 black mana. Plus, you gain much more life. I also rather dislike Doomed Traveler. I get it, it's the original Afterlife card, but the problem is that it's simply underwhelming. There are a lot of 1-mana 1/1 creatures that make tokens when they die that Teysa isn't currently playing in this average list. I know, this one makes a flying token, but it is still a 1-mana 1/1 with no other relevant abilities. At least Orsov Enforcer is a death touch blocker to help defend us. We have better death triggers we could be spending a card slot on than this. Our next cuts are all 4-mana cards that I simply harbor no personal love for. Diabolic Tutor. 4 mana? It's probably blasphemous to be cutting this card in the consistency section, because this does definitionally give the deck more consistency by finding us the card that we need. But paying this much mana to get a single card into hand, and which does not affect the board state, in my experience with Teysa, involves a lot of not being able to do anything else that turn, which is a fairly big tempo hit, and that tends to make the deck performance go down, not up. Next, Utter End is 4 mana to remove a single permanent. At 4 mana, we're entering Wrath territory. These colors are masters of removal, and cheap removal at that. Keep this card if Indestructible Gods are a consistent thing in your playgroup, I suppose, but I just do not appreciate 4 mana for single target removal. And on that note, Return to Dust is, in my opinion, outdated. 4 mana to exile 1 artifact or enchantment at instant speed? I'd rather take a leaf out of the Boros Legion's book, not that the Boros Legion has ever read any books, and play Crush Contraband. If we're casting Return to Dust instead as a sorcery, we can hit 2 targets, but in that case I'd rather be using Dismantling Wave. Or, better yet, why don't we turn this into a card that directly synergizes with our commander? Reliquary Monk can give double death and double destruction to anything we do not want sticking around, and it also happily helps trigger our Blood Artists, and can be brought back with our other cards, such as Reveillock. That is much better consistency. Though again, if you feel the need to run exile effects in your own personal meta, use the Crush Contraband here instead. Another thing I take umbrage with is this deck's mana. Teysa is carrying a lot of firepower here, but it also means that the deck's mana curve is rather high. Yes, it doesn't help that I've cut cards like Doomed Traveler, but still, there is a lot of crowding at the 4 and 5 and 6 mana slots in this deck. I don't think the, 7-ish ramp effects in the deck will get this job done on their own. Yes, that's how low the count is. There are only approximately 5 mana rocks, Solemn Simulacrum, and a Smothering Tithe. And no, I don't count cards such as Revel in Riches, Pitiless Plunderer, or Black Market, because ramp at 5 mana is laughable. These are much closer to being big death trigger payoffs than they are cards that help us initially develop our board state. I'd like to at least get something else in here. Just a Commander Sphere and an Orsov Locket. They help get the ball rolling, and we can cash them in case we run out of cards later on. Teysa needs to have the mana to make sure that she can cast all of her lovely haymakers, so any extra ramp that you can stuff into this deck will be well worth the effort. Now, keen Teysa players may have noticed that I didn't count Priest of Forgotten Gods among this ramp discussion, and that is because I'm cutting it. No one enjoys sacrificing their creatures more than me. I have built Teysa, I have built Marin, I have built Rayhan, Mazarek, Carador, Nethroy, Regna and Karlov, Endrick Sar, Shirei, Sir Conrad. I have even built some Selesnya aristocratic strategies, and still the priest underwhelms me. Requiring us to sacrifice 2 creatures for mana is not ramp. That does not help us develop our board. It forces others to sacrifice, but so do so many of the other cards in this deck. The priest draws a card, but that is still minimal, especially considering the fact that this card has to wait a turn for Summoning Sickness to wear off before it may use its ability. This card is a jack of all trades, but that means also that it is a master of none of them. According to EDHREC, 45% of you are running this card in your Teysa Karlov decks, which may mean now that 45% of you are inclined to stop watching, which is no matter. That is your right. However, please be reminded that any breach of meeting etiquette, such as leaving the meeting early, will result in the church being forced to levy additional fines on your monthly dues. We're now at Section 3, on death. If I killed your trust in me with that last section, believe me, this is where I will bring it back. Get it? Undeath, bringing back. It's a reanimator joke. Laugh or I'll tax you. This deck is hungry for more reanimation. No, not the single target, animate deads and such that bring back individual targets. Remember, aristocrats thrive off of the many and the multitudinous, not just single standouts. Reanimation for our purposes is to provide the deck with more staying power. When we sacrifice our creatures, we may draw lots of cards due to effects such as Midnight Reaper. But if we don't find one of those draw outlets, then sacrificing our creatures will leave us a bit stuck. Even just a little minor interaction with the graveyard can help get the ball rolling again. I'll go in order of subtlest to least subtle. First, I actually rather appreciate Dutiful Attendant in this deck. It dies and then gets 2 creatures back into our hand for us to cast again, and those creatures likely explode into even more tokens. Plus, this chains very nicely with Revelark. Next, Wake the Dead. This brings back many creatures all at once during an opponent's combat to help block, and then kills them again afterwards. This card never quite caught on in regular reanimator decks, but that is because it is not a reanimation spell at all. It is a way to get many death triggers during someone else's turn when they least expect it. Why yes, I think I will bring back my Zulaport, and my Blood Artist, and my Harvester, and my Ministrant, and my Requiem Angel. One is also usually able to keep many tokens around even after these creatures die. Or, if Wake the Dead can also bring back a sacrifice outlet, such as a Woe Strider or a Visceraseer, we can sacrifice the token makers and the tokens while our Blood Artist effects are still in play to deal bazillions of damage from almost nowhere. I've personally used this to kill people even when they didn't attack during their combat step. It's delightful. And in that same vein, let us now add Living Death, sacrificing our entire board and bringing it back again while we also terminate everyone else's is a feeling of joy I simply cannot describe in all of its glory. Finally, here is our secret tech for this video. Tombstone Stairwell is an aristocrat's must. It is in the $4 to $5 range at the moment, and it is an absolute bomb, initially brought to my attention by Cameron of the Lab Maniacs. Every turn, not just on our turn, but every turn, it gives every player a 2/2 hasty zombie for each creature in their graveyard. And at the end of the turn, they all die. Not exile, die. I use this in my Sir Conrad deck, and I am not kidding when I say that this card goes from 0 to victory in the blink of an eye. If you have a single aristocrat in play, this is so many death triggers every turn. Even just 5 creatures in a graveyard represents 20 damage in a single round of the table. More if you have Teysa in play, who, by the way, gives our tokens lifelink. This card makes no sense whatsoever, but it is one of the best things that we can play in an aristocrat's deck. Finishing up, there are 2 lands that I'm going to add in here, and I'm going to cut Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse to make room for them. As we saw in the Niv Mizzet video, if you don't have any extra benefits from these, such as landfall effects or top deck manipulation, Playing a tapped land that gets you both of your colors is superior to playing a tapped land that gets you just one of your colors. Since we have so many tapped lands in the list already, the lands I'll replace these with are very cool for an Orzhov deck. Vault of the Archangel makes our massive tokens much harder for our opponents to try and attack into, and High Market is a small sacrifice outlet right there in the mana base. Beautiful. And that leaves us with this magnificent list. The link to it can be found in the description below with the cuts in the maybe board. Our esteemed council hopes you have enjoyed this time with Teysa, and if you wish to be of further service to the church, which of course you do, it is not optional, please be reminded that you are permitted to leave suggestions below for your fellow parishioners to assist and enhance their aristocratic indulgences as well, and of course to suggest future commanders that you wish to see in this series. The church thanks you ever so for your eternal devotion.